Here is a back and shoulder workout for you guys. Today I'm concentrating heavily on the lats for my back portion of the workout and just trying to hit all the heads of the deltoids for my shoulder portion of the workout. I'm eventually trying to load the lats and deltoids through their full contractile range, and sometimes it takes more than one exercise to actually accomplish this. So I'm definitely working them in their fully shortened position where the two attachment points of the muscle are as close as possible. I'm working them in their fully lengthened position where the two attachment points of the muscles are furthest away from one another. And I'm working them in their mid-range where they're strong and have most mechanical advantage. So in order to load the lats through their full contractile range, we need to know a few things first, like where the muscle attaches to the bones and what joints are being influenced and moving when that muscle shortens, and which direction do the muscle fibers run when contracted. So in this visual image of the lats, you get to see the origin, which is the spinous processes of the inferior sixth thoracic vertebra, the iliac crest, the inferior 3 or 4 ribs, and the inferior angle of the scapula. You also get to see the insertion, which is the floor of the intertubercular groove of the humerus. You also get to see which direction the muscle fibers run. The action of the lats: extend, adduct, and medially rotate the humerus. This is my warm-up for priming the lats. I'm using a free motion dual cable machine to perform a straight arm lat pull down. I chose the cables instead of a bar because the bar limits range of motion once it hits the pelvis. With the cables, I can bypass the pelvis and get more range of motion to activate not only the lats but some of the shoulder muscles as well. I'm starting this warm-up leaning back slightly, so when I get to the end range of motion, the cables are pulling at a 90-degree angle to my arms. This will ensure that the lats are being loaded maximally in their most contracted position. As the set continues, I gradually lean further forward so the line of force from the cables is pulling at a 90-degree angle to my arms when my arms are in the mid-range of the exercise. And by the end of the warm-up, I have the cables pulling at a 90-degree angle to my arms where the lats are fully lengthened. Go fairly light on this warm-up and see how much range of motion you can get in the scapulae. Let them elevate on the eccentric stroke and then depress them as much as possible before smoothly transitioning into the concentric stroke, all while maintaining constant tension in the lats throughout the entire range. Now that I got the lats warmed up using light resistance, I'm choosing to load them up as much as possible, getting as much range as possible. So I'm using a Nautilus Nitro pullover machine. And this machine is great because it loads you throughout the entire range and it loads you close to the shoulder joint. So on this one, I'm really conscious of how much tension I'm building in the lats. I'm slowly controlling it up. Then I'm driving my elbows out, down, and then back. So it's like an arc. Keeping the tension in the lats as I come up, and then slowly driving my elbows out, down, and back, all while trying to maintain the exact same spinal position, driving myself back into the back pad, keeping my hips still, and everything else should be as still as possible except for the motion occurring at the shoulders. After challenging the lats throughout their full range, I then move on to a Nautilus Nitro lat pull down machine. I'm keeping a neutral grip here, and I'm really focusing on the stretch. So the eccentric portion right here, I'm letting my shoulder blades elevate as much as possible, and then I'm trying to slowly depress the shoulder blades before any motion occurs at the elbow. So what that's doing is lengthening the lats as much as possible under the load, and then the lats are activated to actually depress the shoulder blades. Then I begin the pull. So the most important part of a lat pull down, like this one, is the stretch at the top, because you're loading the muscle bellies of the lats in their fully lengthened position. So I don't really worry about how far my elbows are getting down, but just getting the lats as lengthened as possible and then initiating that movement with the lats and keeping lots of tension in there and going as heavy as possible, maintaining very strict form. After the pull down, I move on to the Nautilus Nitro seated row. I went pretty heavy here. Now the most important part is to keep that spine straight up and down, so I don't want any motion occurring at the hips. I let the shoulder blades protract, go all the way forward, then I retract before I begin the pull. So all the way forward with the shoulder blades, retract, then pull. I'm not worried about getting my elbows back as far as I can, because if the elbows start going up in the arc, then you're no longer using the lats. So keep everything nice and solid and squeeze. And I'm also thinking about wrapping my elbows around my rib cage when I get back there. After finishing my back portion of the exercise routine, I moved on to shoulders. So in order to load the deltoids through their full contractile range, we need to know a few things first, like where the muscle attaches to the bones, and what joints are being influenced when the muscle shortens, and what direction do the muscle fibers run when contracted. So in this visual image of the three heads of the delts, you get to see the origin of the anterior part, which is the anterior border of the lateral third of the clavicle. You get to see the origin of the medial part, which is the lateral border of the acromion process of the scapulae. The posterior part, which is the inferior edge of the scapular spine. You also get to see the insertion of the anterior part, which is the deltoid tuberosity on the lateral surface of the proximal humeral shaft, the medial part where the deltoid tuberosity on the lateral surface of the proximal humeral shaft, the posterior part where the deltoid tuberosity on the lateral surface of the proximal humeral shaft, and the action of the deltoids: abduct the shoulder, flex the shoulder, and extend the shoulder. So for my first shoulder exercise, I'm trying to target the medial delts. So I'm using a Nautilus Nitro lateral raise machine. I'm slowly driving my elbows out, then up. And whenever I get to the top of this range of motion right there, I'm trying to keep my shoulder blades wherever they are. And then I gradually lower my elbows back down toward my rib cage, still leaving some space between the arms and the ribs so there's still tension being created in the deltoids. Another thing I'm doing here, as I'm prying out and up with my elbow, I'm also driving the top portion of my humerus down in my shoulder, creating a lot more tension. After pre-fatiguing the medial delts, I then wanted to move on to the anterior delts, so I did a military dumbbell press. Now, after doing the lateral raise, I've kind of compromised some of my strength, so these are 55s. And what I'm trying to do is take the elbows out, down, and then drive elbows up and in toward my ears. Now, you'll notice I'm not touching the dumbbells at the top. I'm leaving them just outside of my ears. That way there's still tension on the anterior deltoids. And so I'm squeezing, trying to drive my elbows together, then slowly letting those elbows come back down. Now it's time for the posterior deltoids. So I'm using a free motion dual cable machine here. The resistance is fairly light, just so I can actually control it and contract the rear delts like I want to. So I let my hands come up slightly, and then I'm pulling them apart. I'm pulling out and slightly down, and I'm trying to limit the motion of the scapula. I'm really just trying to have the movement occur at the glenohumeral joint, where it's just the humerus moving and not so much the shoulder blades. So right there, they're getting really short, and now they're lengthened, and I'm done.